Jupiter is the planet of goodness that flows through us. It's the force within us that feels good, and that's a really simple and concise definition. But we all know at some point that feeling of feeling good within ourselves, and that's us being in contact with the Jupiter force. And Jupiter is a fire planet, and all the fire planets, the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter, they're also male planets. So fire is inspiration, male is initiation, initiating and doing things, whereas female is receiving things from the world. And Jupiter takes it to the next step when we are inspired to do something. Through the repetition of that inspired action, we develop a purpose and a meaning in our life. And Jupiter, wherever Jupiter is in the chart, is where a person is going to find their purpose and meaning in those activities that Jupiter is influencing. So when we're doing and when we're inspired to do something and we develop a meaning and purpose to our life, we're developing our Jupiter and we're developing a closer contact with the meaning of life in general. So Jupiter also symbolizes a person's belief system, a person's philosophy, and this is and also virtue, and we'll talk about virtue in a moment, but this is also why Jupiter is related to religions, because religions are systems of morality that are instructing people how to create a virtuous cycle of action and purpose. And so religions on their own, that's another topic, but one's understanding of how to live, one's ideas about virtues and one's beliefs about how to structure one's own life, and also one's beliefs on how the society at large should be structured, certain moral codes or ethical codes, these are all ruled by Jupiter, and it's based in the meaning that one creates from inspired action. That's the root of the Jupiter force that's within us. And then from that inspired action and meaning, a person will create ideas and larger structures of how one's own life and how the rest of society should be structured. So this is all some of the attributes of how Jupiter is operating. And so Jupiter is a fire planet, but it rules over the ether element. So what's ether? It's a somewhat mysterious, it's the most mysterious of the elements to us in our modern age. It's the most subtle of the elements. All of the other elements are derived from ether originally. And ether is it's a medium. It's a subtle, immeasurable through our instruments medium through which spiritual energies flow. It's a subtle, divine, spiritual energy. And an easy way to say an easy metaphor is it's the force from the movies Star Wars. Now the force is this imperceptible medium that you can move objects, you can speak mentally to other people, and understanding and being in connection with it gives a person a power over the material reality, and you can manipulate material reality because you're able to manipulate the source of the material reality, which is this ether element. And in the Bible, so the ether element, in the Bible, the first sentence is, "In the beginning was the Word." And that's another way of saying, in the beginning was a vibration, in the beginning was a sound. And that original noise, that original sound is the Om sound. But you can't hear the Om sound with your physical senses. You can only hear the Om sound through spiritual senses, through a connection with the ether, the ethereal network of reality. And so people who are in closer contact with the ether element are able to feel that force flowing through them. They can feel that force flowing through them, which makes them feel better, makes you feel good, and that's the Jupiter force. The closer someone is in contact with it, makes them feel good. If you're manipulating reality, say the dark side in Star Wars, they're manipulating reality, they have a power over the force, they can feel good doing controlling and harmful things to other people, but they're feeling that flow through them. So It's not that Jupiter just makes a person a spiritual good person. Jupiter forces the contact with that subtle reality, and how we use our contact with that subtle reality depends on the person. If we're benefiting society and benefiting ourselves, it's up for the use of that. Each individual person is going to use their Jupiter force in a different way. So that ether force, that connection to that ether force is what Jupiter is giving to us, our connection to the divine energetic realm. And that original force that's giving energy to the rest of creation, that original Om vibration. Jupiter it's what's connecting us to that. And so someone with a good Jupiter, as I said, will be able to connect deeper into their purpose, be able to connect deeper into the subtle forces of the world, and therefore be able to feel that divine feeling of feeling good through them. But someone with a harmed Jupiter is going to have a skewed understanding of how they feel good, what makes them feel good, what they're inspired to do. And they also sometimes can have skewed perceptions on what their beliefs are, or their beliefs will be getting in the way of what they want to do. So there's a disruption with their pure expression of their inspiration. They're performing that inspiration and creating a cycle of virtue, because Jupiter rules over virtues. So what are virtues? Virtues are things that benefit society and therefore benefit oneself in a healthy way. And some of these virtues that Jupiter rules over are forgiveness, such as forgiving yourself, having gratitude for whatever happens to you in your life and feeling that everything has a purpose, everything has a meaning, and being grateful even if it's an undesirable situation. And being generous, again, benefiting other people, being kind and good-humored to other people to make them feel good. These are virtues. And when one is living in a virtuous cycle, there's a flow between what's coming from within oneself, going outwards into the rest of society, which then comes back to a person. Living in a virtuous cycle is someone with a Jupiter energy that's flowing fluidly through them. They're able to feel what is good, they're able to understand what's good, and they're able to perform that goodness. And so another important virtue is the ability to grow in wisdom of having a higher understanding of spiritual systems and growing in wisdom and then sharing wisdom to other people. So sharing that wisdom is teaching, and Jupiter rules over the teaching of higher principles. It's the teacher of the planetary kingdom, and specifically the teacher of spiritual principles, not the teacher of worldly principles. That is Venus, which will be in the next video. So sharing one's knowledge and understandings of higher, the higher principles of how reality is ordered on a subtle and subtler level, and sharing that information. So Jupiter rules over any kind of teacher that is like a professor, not a grade school teacher, not the basics of education. It's the higher levels of education that Jupiter rules over. And that's a virtuous thing to do, to share one's knowledge with other people. And so Jupiter, we could say it's the feeling of happiness and positivity, but as one is living a virtuous cycle, as one is living a virtuous life, happiness is the effect. It's not the purpose of using Jupiter to feel happy. It's the result of living in a virtuous cycle. So people who are seeking to be happy, their endpoint is a bit skewed. They're not seeing that happy is the result of doing things that benefit other people. You naturally feel happy. It shouldn't be the goal in and of itself. The goal is, I want to feel happy. The goal of feeling happy can lead to distorted actions. And so a person with a mal-affected Jupiter, or a person with a Jupiter that's not well placed in the chart, is going to have ideas that they're not sure on how to feel happy inside themselves. They might do things that are externally motivated. They want to do things that they are too focused on the external ways to be happy instead of attempting to feel happy within oneself. Because I was saying that Jupiter is the force of happiness within us, or the force of goodness within us. And so someone with a more externalized sense of happiness, they'll need their external conditions to be optimal for them to feel good inside. But the goodness is an inside-out exercise. It's not an outside-in exercise. And so someone, as I said, with a Jupiter that is not, or someone who is at a bit of confusion or not using their Jupiter force to its full optimal extent, is someone that is going to have ideas about happiness that aren't first giving them sustained and continuous happiness, or they're not able to see the true source of happiness, which is always flowing within themselves. The closer someone is in with their divine understanding of themselves, with the subtlety of life, the more they're naturally going to exude happiness. And so many images of Jupiter will show Jupiter smiling with that subtle smile and with their eyes half closed. And this is because a person with a strong Jupiter is going to be feeling good already within them, that they don't feel the need to say and express as much or use as many words, because their focus is more inward. And for this reason, we say that a good Jupiter, they don't speak as much. But when they do speak, their words have weight. Their words are heavy. And so in Sanskrit, the Sanskrit word for Jupiter is guru, and guru, as most of us know, is a spiritual teacher. But that word itself means heaviness. And a spiritual teacher is heavier in knowledge than someone without as much spiritual knowledge. And therefore, because they're heavier and denser in knowledge, their words have more weight. There's more meaning and purpose to the things that they say when they choose to say it. So a person with a strong Jupiter will have kind of a sense of calm and content, and not feeling the need that they need to spread their knowledge all the time. When Jupiter is conjunct Rahu, for example, Rahu is an externalizing force. Rahu is the north node in Western astrology, but conjunct with this Rahu, a person will externalize their Jupiter force. So these people are going to feel the need to express their beliefs all the time. Someone who's not confident in their beliefs is trying to push their beliefs on someone else. A harmed Jupiter is not going to be calm, content, and at peace with their deeper understandings of the world. They're going to feel that they need to convince other people on how to believe, or what to believe, or how to live their life. They've got an inconsistency with their deeper understandings of themselves, how goodness flows through them, and how to express that. So someone who's externalizing this force of goodness is not allowing the flow, they're not allowing a natural flow within them to express in calm and easy ways on how to live their life in a beneficial way that helps other people. So we don't want to be pushing our beliefs on other people and trying to enforce our beliefs. And it's when we work on our Jupiter force, we're working on feeling that calm and content and peace inside us first. Because when we're at calm and peace, other people will want to emulate that, and we're already sharing sharing our way of being, our belief, in a wiser way by being an example of being at peace. So a good Jupiter, the Jupiter force, is at peace and content and calm, and can feel that goodness without having to say or express very much. So in a woman's chart, Jupiter is the husband. It's the signal. It's the indicator for a woman's husband. And not every woman is meant to have a husband, and not every woman is meant to get married. But what I like to say, if a woman wants to meet someone meet a man who is going to be a good man, a good person, a good pair for her, a good match, the best way to attract that person is to be living virtuously. If a woman wants to attract a great man, work on your Jupiter. Work on understanding the goodness flowing through yourself through virtuous living and creating a virtuous cycle of benefiting others and feeling good about it. Work on doing that, and naturally you're going to attract a virtuous man who will help share, who will aid the woman in Jupiterian ways, through sharing wisdom, through care, through helping a woman find her deeper inspiration, and meaning, give a woman deeper meaning in her life. And for same-sex couples, it's same, but it's different. If a woman wants to attract to another woman, it depends on the flow of masculine and feminine energy between the same-sex couple. So that's a bit different case. But for women who are seeking to attract a man, living virtuously is the fastest way that you're going to be able to attract a virtuous man or someone that will be good to you. And so another important indication of Jupiter is wealth and abundance. And in financial astrology, Jupiter is studied to see the flows of abundance, and therefore money, actual money, or what gives abundance. In our day and age, it's money. So seeing how Jupiter is behaving in the sky will give financial astrologers indications on how the flow of abundance is working in the world. And in a person's personal force of Jupiter will give a feeling of abundance even if you don't have physical possessions, because it's this inner feeling, it's this inner force. You can see poor people who feel they have everything that they need is because their Jupiter is giving them this feeling that I have everything I need, I have wisdom, I have a wealth of knowledge. And this makes a person feel good, even in the absence of physical money or a bank account with a high number in it. So that inner feeling of abundance can then, as it's spread out, can lead to gaining more wealth, and can lead to financial success. And people with strong Jupiters, Jupiter is the foundation for a person's financial ability to make strong financial gains. And also there's other indications, the second house, the 11th house as well. But again, Jupiter is this foundation, this foundation of feeling goodness, feeling virtue, and feeling the wealth of goodness that ends up manifesting externally as physical wealth. So as we work on our Jupiter, as we get in closer touch with this force within us, if we want more money, we work on living virtuously, and eventually that spreads out to externally. We can end up gaining more money through working on understanding the deeper, understanding this force as it works within us. It's not just an external influence. And so every planet spiritualizes us in certain ways. We get to deeper understandings of spirituality through each planet in very unique ways. And as we were saying, Jupiter is naturally a spiritual planet. It indicates how a person feels spiritually in their life. And a person could say that they're an atheist, but they have other beliefs. So a person could be a complete. They don't believe in God. They're an atheist. They have this belief system, but they have strong beliefs in other areas. So even a person with a strong Jupiter, it doesn't mean that they believe in God, but they'll have strong beliefs in some other area in their life. And they can feel those beliefs flowing through them. So it's not necessarily giving a person an understanding of God just because they have a good Jupiter. It's really dependent on each person's understandings of higher principles. But so Jupiter is the natural indicator for for higher philosophies, for higher understanding of how the world works and the belief system. But Jupiter is spiritualizing us even beyond that by helping a person become content and at peace with whatever circumstance one finds oneself in. So Jupiter gives, so if we have an undesirable material condition, someone who has a strong Jupiter force and is in touch with that Jupiter force, they're going to feel good no matter what is happening outside of them, because they are grateful for every experience there is. And this is a very high spiritual condition, and the way that Jupiter helps us grow spiritually by feeling at peace regardless of external circumstances. And getting to that position, we feel wealth, we feel goodness, we feel abundance when times are good and when times are bad. And this gives us spiritual growth because we see that life is a set of experiences that are helping us grow in stressful and in easier and situations with ease. They all have a purpose, they all have a meaning. And being able to see meaning everywhere is a very high spiritual condition that Jupiter gives us. And when we feel and we see meaning everywhere, and we see meaning in our own life has meaning in whatever we do, we're at peace and content. We are at a point where we realize that everything we do has a result, has an effect, and that we have a power in being able to benefit society, benefit other people, and therefore benefit ourselves through this kind of cycle. So that's the way that Jupiter, having a strong Jupiter, will help someone see meaning in every part of their life. So as a short recap, Jupiter is this feeling of goodness that flows, and it can be done in a lot of different ways. It can be felt in a lot of different ways. And you can have somebody that they're not feeling good, they don't feel good, they're depressed people, but at the same time they'll have very strong belief systems. And each chart is very different. So it's not to sum up, it's very difficult to sum up how everyone will experience their Jupiter. It's impossible to say how everyone will experience their Jupiter, because a person can feel very terrible about themselves for other reasons, for having Saturn in their first house or having other difficult conditions. But a person could experience their force of Jupiter through having a strong belief system, having a philosophy that orders their life. That's their attempt to create a virtuous cycle. So someone could have a terrible feeling inside them, but they're living virtuously. It's all very dependent on each person's chart. But we want to focus in on this force as being this flow of divine energy, being able to feel divine purpose flowing through us. And that's why Jupiter, wherever Jupiter is, it manifests good things in life. And we want to see where Jupiter's transits are for people to see if good things are going to be flowing into that person. Because Jupiter gives these blessings of life, whereas Saturn will give hardships that we can learn from, but Saturn has a different kind of has a different influence on a person. It's not positive or negative necessarily, but it's because you can, with a Jupiter influencing a certain period in your life, you can be receiving really things that make you feel good. You can be receiving positivity or desirable situations, but those things could be harming you. You're not able to use those things to help benefit other people. For example, when Mercury and Venus are influencing Jupiter, a person's going to be finding they're going to be attached to feeling good from external things, because Mercury and Venus are very concerned with external things. So when a person is feeling goodness dependent on external circumstances, they're not, even though it could be very desirable and comfortable situations, it's not benefiting oneself on a spiritual level, because you're becoming dependent on external things. Jupiter is this internal flow of virtue. It's this internal sense that we have for higher purpose, the higher purpose in life. and for virtuous, for society to be set up in a way that affects everyone else in beneficial ways and in virtuous ways. And so yeah, I hope that helps bring some illumination to how Jupiter, we need to focus in on the internal feeling of goodness. And when we can feel that internal flow of Jupiter flowing through us, we can use our inspiration to do things in the world with greater meaning. And we can be content with what we feel inside of us. And that's the starting point of being able to affect society on a more positive level. Can't change the world in a positive way. We can't affect society in a positive way if inside we're not content and at peace in ourselves first. So maximizing Jupiter's potential, maximizing Jupiter's strength within us is an internal process, and that's where it all begins. I wanted to add a little bit about how the ether element that Jupiter rules is misunderstood by the modern era. And the reason why this subtle, energetic, divine force is misunderstood is because we live in the most dense material age according to the cyclical cycle of ages in the Vedic culture. So the Vedic culture doesn't measure time as there was a beginning of time, then there's an end of time. It's a cycle, and in this cycle, there are different potentialities and experiences in each environment, in each age. So the easiest way to picture it is as a clock. At 12 o'clock is the top of the golden age, where things are the most spiritual and things are the least dense and the most etherically in touch the beings are with the subtle elements, with the divine etheric elements. And then as you go down the clock to 1, 2 o'clock, the age will change into the silver age, where there's different potential and there's different technologies, there's a different experience altogether. And then down into the bronze age, again, changes in how the beings experience reality, and into the iron age, which is the most materially dense, and then which will be at the 6 o'clock. And then after that, back into bronze, into silver, and then back into the golden age again. We are living in the Kali Yuga Iron Age now, the most dense material age. But it's interesting because we're taught in schools that we are the most advanced culture of all time, but it's not true, not according to the Vedic culture. The good news is that we're leaving this and we're entering into a more spiritualized environment. The density is lessening. We're becoming a more etheric. We're getting more in touch day by day, year by year, into the more etheric, into closer touch and direct contact with the ether element, which once we feel that flowing through us, we're more in contact with divinity itself. And so modern science has no way of measuring the ether, but it's fascinating because they talk about the ether all the time. In quantum mechanics and quantum physics, they have experiments that show that time and space aren't the end. That the movement of matter isn't 100% dependent on time and space. The double slit experiment, these ways that matter can move outside of time and space. And it's similar to how a thought can be transferred in real time to another person across the world, is because that thought is being transferred through the medium of the ether, not through electricity or water or earth or air. It's being transferred across a different fabric, and that fabric is the ether. So quantum mechanics, they are so fascinated about how they are able to describe the world in a certain way, but they don't use the term ether, they use the term dark matter. Because in order for all of their equations to work, there has to be this other material that permeates everything of reality in order for their experiments to work, because they're observing certain things, but in order for them to work, there's this immeasurable, unviewable substance that is connecting everything. Well, that's what all spiritual gurus and all spiritual beings would call the ether. And that's what's been known for time eternal. It's the ether element. It's the fifth element, but it's actually the first element because the other elements come from it. So it's really interesting that we have an environment in the world where there's even a debate about whether the spiritual world exists or not, if there is divinity. Well, it's because divinity can't be measured by modern experiments, and the divinity, what we would consider magical powers, is being able to use this etherical element to our being able to control and have contact with the ether, with the force, as in Star Wars. So I just thought it was interesting, and I wanted to just say that how we're in the Iron Age, we're in the Kali Yuga, when we're the most dense materially, and there's the lack of understanding of the ether element, as shown through modern science's lack of ability to admit that that there is a divine energy, that there is a spiritual energy, and that energy is the ether, and it's been talked about for eons, for all the other epochs, when there is closer contact with that spiritualizing energy. So, as I said, the good news is that we're leaving this dense materiality, and we're going into the upswing where gradually the material conditions on Earth become more spiritualized, become more in touch with the subtle energies that flow between divine energies and the energies between other people. So, just wanted to end the video on that, and how it looks like we're seeing Jupiter energy rising into our world, and being able to become closer in contact with the subtle forces of the universe. Okay, next video is Venus.